Imagine you're walking down a street in your hometown. You've walked here 1,000 times. You know every crack in the asphalt, every storefront, every smell. It's a typical Tuesday, a gray day. The noise of cars, horns, snippets of conversations from passers-by. You turn a corner just as you did yesterday, the day before, and a year ago. But this time, something is different. It doesn't happen instantly, like in the movies. There's no flash of light or spinning portal. First, the sound changes. The noise of the modern city, the hum of engines, sirens, music from passing cars, suddenly fades. It doesn't disappear completely, but becomes muffled. Flat, as if you're in a soundproof room or under a thick layer of cotton. Then the air changes. Witnesses describe this feeling in the same way. The atmosphere becomes heavy, still. Dead air. No wind, no movement. The birds stop singing. You look up and realize the street looks wrong. The asphalt is gone. Beneath your feet are cobblestones. The electronics store you were heading to has vanished. In its place is a shop with a wooden sign, written in a font that hasn't been used for 50 years. In the window are strange women's hats and corsets. A woman passes by, but she isn't looking at a phone. She's wearing a long, floor-length dress, and in her hands is a woven basket. You feel a surge of panic, a cold sweat. Your brain desperately tries to find a rational explanation. A movie shoot? A prank? A hallucination? You turn to look back at the familiar intersection, and when you turn your head back, it's all gone. A loud car horn blasts in your ears. The smell of exhaust fumes hits your nose. The electronics store is back in its place. The woman in the long dress has vanished. You're standing in the middle of the sidewalk, your heart pounding wildly, as passers-by glance at you, giving you a wide berth. You've just experienced what paranormal researchers call a time slip. It sounds like a script for the Twilight Zone, like an urban legend told around a campfire. But the problem is, there are thousands of these stories. They come from Liverpool and Paris, from New York and London, from housewives, police officers, pilots, and university professors. People who have never been interested in science fiction claim that for a few minutes, and sometimes hours, they fell out of their own time and found themselves in the past. They saw buildings that had long since burned down. They heard conversations in archaic dialects. Some even interacted with people from the other side. Mainstream science says it's impossible. Time is an arrow that flies only forward. The past is dead, recorded in textbooks, and cannot intersect with the present. Psychology says it's a trick of the mind. Fatigue, stress, false memories. Our brain is an unreliable witness. But what if they're wrong? What if the fabric of our reality isn't as solid as we think? What if it has holes, cracks, through which you can fall just by turning down the wrong street? Today, we're opening the archives. We will set aside skepticism and look at the facts. We will analyze the most famous and documented cases of time slips. We will walk through the gardens of Versailles with two English ladies who saw a ghost of the French Revolution. We will stroll down Bold Street in Liverpool, a street considered the most active temporal anomaly on the planet. And we will try to answer the main question: what was it? A glitch in the brain or a glitch in the universe? Get ready. We are embarking on a journey where the map doesn't match the territory, and the watch on your wrist could start running backward at any moment. And we will begin with the story that is considered the patient zero of this phenomenon. A case that occurred over 100 years ago, but still sparks fierce debate. August 10th, 1901. A hot summer day in France. Two English tourists, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, decide to visit the famous Palace of Versailles. It's important to note, these were not impressionable teenagers or mystics. Moberly was the principal of a women's college at Oxford. Jourdain was the vice principal of a girls' school and the daughter of a vicar. They were stern, academic ladies of the Edwardian era, educated, skeptical, rational. The last thing they expected to encounter was the paranormal. After touring the palace, they decided to walk through the park towards the Petit Trianon, Queen Marie Antoinette's favorite retreat. They were walking along the paths, discussing their affairs, when the world around them began to change. First, a strange feeling of oppression washed over them. Moberly later described it as a heavy dreaminess. The sensation was physical, as if the air had become thick, The landscape changed. The shadows disappeared. The trees began to look flat, as if painted on a tapestry. The wind died down. That unnatural silence, which would become the hallmark of the time-slip phenomenon, fell upon them. They saw old, abandoned farm buildings and a plow left on the ground. Then they met people. Two men in long greenish coats and tricorn hats. The women thought they were gardeners in historical uniforms for tourists. But the men's faces were strange, dark, with an expression of some frozen malevolence. The ladies asked for directions. The men pointed the way mechanically, their expressions unchanging. Further on, they saw a gazebo where a man with a pockmarked face and a wide-brimmed hat was sitting. Moberly felt an irrational terror at the sight of him. It seemed as if a wave of evil emanated from him, and finally, the climax. On the lawn in front of the Petit Trianon, Moberly saw a lady. She was sitting on the grass, sketching in a notepad. She wore an old-fashioned summer dress, a straw hat, and a light shawl. The lady looked up and stared directly at the Englishwomen. Moberly claimed that her gaze was vacant, yet piercing. At that moment, the spell broke. A footman, this time a very real one, ran up from behind and informed them that the passage was closed. The world filled with sounds, colors, and ordinary tourists again. The women returned to England, shaken. At first, they didn't dare discuss it even with each other, but when they finally spoke, a frightening detail emerged. Moberly had seen the lady with the notepad. Jourdain had not. For Jourdain, the lawn was empty. But Jourdain had seen other details that Moberly had missed. They began an investigation. And what they found shocked them more than the walk itself. It turned out that in 1901, there were no gardeners in tricorn hats at Versailles. The plow they saw did not exist. The gazebo where the frightening man sat was also gone. It had been demolished many years before. But the most interesting discovery awaited them in the historical archives. Studying old maps of Versailles, they found that the landscape they had seen, the layout of the paths, a small bridge over a stream that no longer exists, matched the plans of 1789 exactly. The bridge they had crossed existed only at the end of the 18th century. And the lady with the notepad? Her description perfectly matched portraits of Marie Antoinette. And it was in August, shortly before her arrest, that the Queen loved to sit on the lawn of the Petit Trianon. In 1911, they published a book, an adventure, under pseudonyms. The book became a sensation. Skeptics, of course, attacked them. They said the ladies had gotten lost, overheated in the sun, or had seen a costume party hosted by the eccentric Count Robert de Montesquieu, who lived nearby. But no single theory explained everything, especially the bridge. How could two Englishwomen know about a small wooden bridge that had disappeared a century ago and then walk across it? The Versailles incident opened Pandora's box. People began to realize that their own strange experiences might not be madness. But if Versailles is a story of ghosts from the past, the next place on our list is a veritable station for time travelers. A place where reality tears, regularly and crudely. Welcome to Liverpool, to a street where shop windows change faster than you can blink. Bold Street, one of the city's central shopping streets, cafes, boutiques, hipster bars, an ordinary bustling place. But among paranormal researchers, this street is known as a glitch zone. The number of reports of temporal anomalies here exceeds any statistical margin of error. The most famous case occurred in 1996 with an off-duty police officer named Frank. Last name withheld for obvious reasons. Frank was out shopping with his wife, Carol. They split up. Carol went to a bookstore, and Frank headed to a CD store. He was walking down Bold Street when he felt that same change in atmosphere. The sounds faded. The asphalt under his feet felt different. Frank looked at the storefront he was heading to. Instead of the Dillon's sign, a bookstore chain at the time, he saw a sign that read Crips. Moreover, the window display featured not books and CDs, but women's handbags and shoes. And not modern ones, but in the style of the 1940s or 50s. Frank thought the store had closed for renovations or changed owners. But when he looked at the street, he was seized with terror. The cars were old, vans with lettering he remembered from his childhood. People were dressed in gray coats and hats. Men were smoking pipes. It didn't look like a historical reenactment or a film set. It looked too mundane, gritty, real. Frank started to panic. He tried to step back onto the sidewalk but noticed that the passers-by paid him no attention. He was a ghost to them. And then he saw a girl. She was standing at the entrance to the Cripps store. But she looked modern. Jeans, a backpack, a bright jacket. She looked just as confused as he was. Frank approached her. The girl looked at him with relief. She was also seeing this wrong world. Frank grabbed her arm, and together they walked through the store's doors. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the illusion vanished. They were in the modern Dillon's bookstore. Around them were contemporary books, and 90s music was playing. But when Frank turned around, he saw that the girl was gone. She had vanished as soon as they returned to their time. Later, Frank found out that a store called Cripps had indeed been at that location in the 1950s. And this is not the only story. In 2006, a young man named Sean stole a jacket from a store. Fleeing from a security guard, he turned into an alley leading to Bold Street. When he ran out onto the street, he was nearly hit by a vintage car. Sean looked around and realized he was in the past. No mobile phones, strange clothing, smog from coal heating. In a panic, he rushed back into the alley and ran out into modern Liverpool, right into the arms of the pursuing security guard. The guard later said that Sean was pale as a ghost and shaking. He didn't resist arrest, only mumbled, "I saw the past. I saw the past." Skeptics will say, Liverpool is an old city. The architecture has been preserved. It's easy to get confused. But witnesses describe details that are impossible to mistake. Car brands that no longer exist. Newspaper headlines. Prices in shop windows in shillings and pence. Why Bold Street specifically? Local researchers point out that a complex network of underground tunnels and old communications runs beneath Liverpool, and the street itself is on high ground. One theory suggests that the combination of electromagnetic fields from the subway and the area's geological features creates a sort of natural time machine, or, at the very least, causes mass hallucinations. And here we come to a fork in the road. Either hundreds of people are genuinely falling through holes in time, or our brain has a built-in mechanism capable of generating incredibly realistic illusions. Let's give science the floor. Because it has its own explanation, and frankly, it's no less frightening than ghosts. Your brain isn't a video camera that dispassionately records reality. It's a frantic director, editing a film on the fly, and sometimes it inserts frames into that film that shouldn't be there. Psychologists and neurobiologists offer several rational explanations for the time slip phenomenon. Explanation 1. Cryptomnesia. Hidden memory. This is when you recall something you saw or read long ago but have forgotten the source. Your brain presents this memory as your own new experience. Imagine, you're walking through Versailles. You're tired. It's hot. Your brain switches to autopilot. Somewhere in the depths of your subconscious, an image you saw in a history book 20 years ago surfaces, or a scene from an old movie. The brain superimposes this image onto reality. It paints in people in tricorn hats and old bridges. To you, it looks completely real. You don't remember the movie, but you see the scene. This is a powerful argument. Moberly and Jourdain were educated women. They had surely seen old maps of Versailles and portraits of Marie Antoinette, even if they had consciously forgotten. Explanation 2. Temporal lobe epilepsy. This condition is not always accompanied by seizures. Sometimes it's just brief blackouts or hallucinations. People with this pathology often describe a waking dream sensation, déjà vu, and visual distortions. The world can become flat, colors can change, sounds can disappear. Sound familiar? This is exactly how the beginning of a time slip is described. The silence, the flatness, the feeling of unreality. Perhaps the time travelers were simply experiencing a micro-seizure triggered by stress or magnetic fields. Explanation 3. The filling-in effect. Our eye has a blind spot. We don't see it because the brain fills in the picture by copying the surrounding texture. The same thing happens with memory and perception. If you're walking down an old street at dusk and your brain can't recognize a distant silhouette, it will substitute the most likely image. You're in a historic district? Your brain might substitute a horse-drawn carriage for a trash can, a man in a cloak for a shadow from a tree. And finally, the priming effect. If you've heard legends about the ghosts of Versailles before your trip, your brain will look for confirmation. It will interpret any creak as footsteps, any shadow as a figure. This could explain the epidemic on Bold Street. Once Frank's story became known, people expected to see the past, and the brain obediently gave them what they wanted. The scientific explanation sounds convincing. It's reassuring. It puts us back in control. We're not going crazy. Our biological computer just glitches sometimes. But there's one problem. Hallucinations are usually individual. Two people rarely see the same glitch at the same time. But Moberly and Jourdain did. Frank and the girl in the store did. And hallucinations are usually visual. But what about cases where the past intrudes not through the eyes, but through the ears? When witnesses hear the sounds of events that ended hundreds of years ago, with such volume and detail that they cover their ears? Here, the brain glitch theory begins to fall apart. Imagine you're standing in an empty field in the middle of the night, not a soul around. And suddenly, the air is torn apart by the screams of 1,000 dying men. Auditory time slips are a phenomenon even more terrifying than visual ones. You can close your eyes. You can't close your ears. In 1951, two women were vacationing in Dieppe, France. They were awakened in the night by a terrible noise. First, they heard a low hum, like approaching aircraft. Then the sounds of explosions, machine gun fire, and shouted commands in German. The noise was so real that the women ran out onto their balcony, expecting to see a war. But the sky was clear. The town was asleep. The sounds continued for 3 hours. They would fade and then swell again. The women wrote down the time of each attack. Later, researchers compared their notes with the timeline of the famous Dieppe raid, which took place in 1942, exactly 9 years earlier. The time the attack began, the pauses, the time of retreat, everything matched to the minute. The women didn't see the battle. They heard it, as if someone had turned on a recording through giant speakers aimed directly at their windows. Another famous case occurred in England, in the cellar of an old house in York. A plumber named Harry Martindale was working in the cellar, installing pipes. Suddenly he heard the sound of a horn. Then, out of the wall, walked a Roman legionary. He was visible only from the waist up. His legs disappeared into the floor, as if he were walking on a road that was below the level of the modern cellar. An entire troop followed him. Harry could hear the clank of armor, the heavy breathing of the soldiers, the creak of leather. The horses with them were also sunk into the floor. Harry sat in a corner, paralyzed with terror, until the procession passed through the opposite wall. Later, archaeologists confirmed, an old Roman road does indeed run under that house. And it is at the exact depth where the legionaries' feet would have been. These stories baffle science. A hallucination? Perhaps. But why do the details, the time of the attack, the level of the road, match historical facts the witnesses couldn't have known? Here we enter territory where psychology is powerless. If it's not a glitch in the brain, then it's a glitch in space. Can a place remember an event? Imagine the universe is not just empty space, but a medium for information, like a magnetic tape or a hard drive. A powerful emotional event, a battle, a murder, a disaster, is a massive release of energy. Could this release burn a recording onto the fabric of reality? This idea is the basis for one of the most popular, albeit pseudoscientific, theories in parapsychology. A theory that tries to explain why ghosts often repeat the same actions, like a scratched record. This concept is called the stone tape theory, and it posits that walls really do have ears and memories. The idea was proposed in the 1970s as an attempt to find a scientific-sounding explanation for hauntings. The theory is simple. The environment, stones, water, bricks, wood, can act as a recording device. The crystalline structure of minerals, like quartz and granite or silicon and brick, can change its structure when exposed to a powerful electromagnetic or emotional impulse. It records the event. A battle, a murder, a tragedy. These are peak states. People release a colossal amount of energy. This energy is imprinted onto the location. For years, the recording lies dormant. But then certain conditions arise. A thunderstorm, a magnetic storm, or simply a person with high sensitivity, like the needle on a record player, and the recording begins to play back. This is why many ghosts don't react to the living. They are not the spirits of the dead. They are holograms. A video recording that plays over and over. The Roman legionaries in the York cellar didn't see the plumber. They were just walking their route, recorded 2,000 years ago. It sounds elegant. But this theory has a fatal flaw. It explains passive observations. When we watch the past like a movie. But it doesn't explain interactivity. Remember the case in Liverpool? Frank and the girl entered a 1950s store. They interacted with the space. They opened a door that shouldn't have been there. In other reports, people have spoken to ghosts. Moberly and Jourdain asked the gardeners for directions, and they answered. A video recording can't answer a question. A hologram can't open a door for you. If people are truly entering the past and can act within it, then we are not dealing with a place memory. We are dealing with physical displacement. And here we must leave mysticism behind and turn to the most complex and mind-bending area of human knowledge, to quantum physics and the theory of relativity. Einstein taught us that time is not a constant. It is a dimension, just like length, width, and height. And if you can move left and right, why can't you move to yesterday? Physicists call these closed time-like curves. We call them time machines. But what if this machine is a natural phenomenon? Let's simplify. Imagine time as a river. It usually flows straight. But if there's a huge rock on the riverbed, a gravitational anomaly, or a black hole, the water starts to swirl. It forms whirlpools where the current flows backward. In Einstein's general theory of relativity, there are solutions to the equations that allow for such whirlpools. Wormholes. Einstein-Rosen bridges. We usually think of wormholes as a way to travel between stars. But theoretically, they can connect not only different points in space, but also different points in time. What if there are natural microscopic wormholes on Earth? Wandering anomalies. They are unstable. They open and close spontaneously, like bubbles in boiling water. When Frank on Bold Street stepped into the 1950s, he may have passed through such a bubble. This explains why the atmosphere changes. A drop in pressure, a change in gravity, static electricity, all are side effects of a portal opening. There is another theory, the multiverse. Many physicists, including the late Stephen Hawking, allow for the existence of parallel worlds. In this concept, the past doesn't disappear. It continues to exist in a parallel universe. The year 1950 is happening right now, just on a different radio frequency. Sometimes the frequencies overlap. Interference occurs, like an old radio that suddenly picks up two stations at once. You hear both modern music and news from the 1940s through the static. To a person, this looks like an overlay of realities. You see a modern street, but the outlines of old buildings show through. This explains the transparency and flatness of the visions. You are on the border between two worlds. But this theory raises the most terrifying question. If this is physics, not a hallucination, if the passage is real, then it must work both ways. We've heard the stories of people who came back. They got scared, ran back, and found themselves in their own time again. But what if someone didn't make it back in time? What if the bubble collapsed while the person was on the other side? In police archives around the world, there are thousands of cases of people who went out for bread and disappeared. Without a trace. Without a motive. Without a body. We're used to thinking of criminals and accidents, but the statistics are relentless. The percentage of unsolved disappearances is frighteningly stable. Could it be that some of these people are now wandering the streets of the 19th century, considered insane, or trapped in an empty Versailles of 1789? History knows of disappearances that defy logic, and one of them strangely echoes our theme. There is an urban legend about a man named Rudolph Fentz. In 1950, a man was hit by a car in Times Square, New York City. The police who arrived on the scene were baffled. The deceased was dressed in a suit from the 1870s. In his pockets, they found old coins, a letter dated 1876, and a business card with the name Rudolph Fentz. The strangest thing, all his belongings looked brand new. The paper wasn't yellowed, the clothes didn't smell of mothballs. A police officer began an investigation. He searched old missing persons files, and he found a record for a Rudolph Fentz, who had gone for a walk in 1876 and vanished without a trace. Skeptics claim this story is a work of fiction, based on a short story by writer Jack Finney. Most likely it is. But why is this myth so persistent? Because it resonates with our deepest fear. The fear of being lost not in space, but in time. To be cast ashore in a foreign era, where no one will believe you, where your money is worthless, your knowledge is useless, and your family has not yet been born or is long dead. We have examined the phenomenon of time slips from all angles. We have seen the ghosts of Versailles. We have walked through a spectral Liverpool. We have listened to neurobiologists talk about memory glitches, and physicists speculate about wormholes. So what is it really? The rational part of me wants to say, it's the brain, it's psychology, it's tricks of the mind. That is the safe explanation. But there is another part, the one that gets goosebumps when the acoustics in a quiet room suddenly change. Thousands of people can't all be colluding. The details can't match up by chance. Perhaps time is not a straight road. Perhaps it is an ocean. And sometimes, in this ocean, there are storms. Waves from the past crash onto the shore of the present. The next time you walk down a familiar street and suddenly notice it has become too quiet, that the air has grown thick, that the signs look strange. Don't stop. Don't speak to the passers-by. And don't look back. Just keep walking forward and hope that you are still home, because the door to the past may be open, but there's no guarantee it will be open for the way back.